I was commenting that I was out of town for a week. I did something I've never done before. I went to climb a mountain. Don't believe like Sylvester I did with the ropes. I hiked up, but it was an excursion, very beautiful. It was a time of rest, a retreat that I needed to do. It was of a lot of blessing. Be outside, smell, breathe clean air, fresh air, something that touches our souls. I went through several paths in the mud. There was no waterfall, and I stood in the middle of the river with the water flowing. I've never experienced such thing, but it was very necessary, very refreshing being there. That I truly gave God thank you for the opportunity. I also thank God that I was okay. That we just let me know if you fall. We know where to find you. Bear H mauled you or something. We know where you're at. But nothing happened. But it was a beautiful time. And in that time, I could appreciate what the pastor had been talking about. The title of the sermon is "I Will Live with All This freedom that we have to enjoy everything that God has given us, and the freedom is something that we don't take so easily. Or am I alone? We don't take freedom very lightly because it is something we live in. The concept of freedom, I've also started thought about that it has been distorted as time goes by. What freedom, what was in its essence, and it's an old memory. The freedom doesn't mean the same as like others, and some people confuse freedom with free will, and it is very easy to fall into this trap of interpretations. Are you with me? It's easy to believe that believing the same when it's totally different. Psalms 119, verse 45, the psalm says, "And I will walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts." The new translation said, "I shall walk at liberty, for I have sought your precepts." It's a little more simple, isn't it? To understand that the psalm writer was saying that that he lives in total liberty because he's obeying God's commandments. Us as children of God, we take at times, you know, very easy. Like, so when we live, we take it lightly. So when we live within the commandments of God, that's when we have complete liberty. We don't fear anything. And what is liberty? Can someone tell me what liberty is? We're all going to say the same. This is everything for me. This from me, or this is for me. According to this Royal Spanish Academy says natural faculty that man has act in one way. This applies to women as well, and not to act so he is responsible for his actions. State or condition of someone who is not a slave. State of the person who is not in prison. Lack of restraint and subordination. That is what liberty means in its essence. In another, we can say is have the freedom to do or not to do. We can select or choose to do what we want. Or we have the freedom. We all have the freedom the ability, the faculty of to do what I want to do. Why? Because we are free. But here's a here's a but. But we're not free of the consequences of our actions. Every action has a reaction. If I treat my, for instance, if I were treat my brother, with niceness, he's gonna be nice to me. But if I'm gonna treat him in a mean way, he's not gonna treat me the same way. I'm gonna say, hey, but at least say hi. I'm not free for him to react the same way as I approached him. Are we clear? I read this in this past days. I read this, and it spoke to me. And it says, freedom is not about pursuing the selfish desires, but about choosing what is good, noble, and in alignment with God's plan for our lives. The freedom that we have as children of God, it's not to choose something to be selfish with it or to choose in a selfish way, because it's not only us in this planet, not only us in this area. A lot of times, as Latin people, and we have this mentality of I am the father, and whatever I say goes. And a lot of times, we don't consider that there's a lot other people, other living beings that are in this environment. The truth is that the freedom that God gives us, it's not just any freedom. Everyone here in this world has freedom. Some things, places that there isn't in. But in general, there is some sort of freedom. Why? Unless you commit some sort of a fault, there are sometimes you can commit a crime, but that there's a consequence for that. Now, where is this feeling of freedom coming from? Is there something inside of us that asks us to be free? Let's be honest. Which one of us likes to be subjected or be prisoners or slaves? I met a person who loved being a slave. I never understood him. His criminal life was to be locked up, and he didn't know how to adapt to society from as long because he was how he's been incarcerated so much. He would get out and then go back again. But the majority of us doesn't like to be imprisoned. Am I right? Everything. But, there's a but. But we are subdued to something. We are subject to something. Whether it be an engagement that we may have. Even, in our responsibilities, in our word. I tell them, I'm going to go. Even though something came up. Because I have to say, no, I can't. Because I'm already engaged to do something else. So we all have something that subjects us. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me. The musical instruments. Asked my wife, I see an instrument, I want it. And I have that in my mind. And I've learned little by little. I can't buy them all. I don't have enough money for it. And we have to eat. And we have to pay bills, yeah? But reality, and that is a binding for me. It's best if I don't see them. But I don't like the ones that cost $200-300. I like the ones that cost 1,000 up. And the reality is that we all live in a way that binds us. but I'm not slave to them. My job, I have to use them. I would like to see them, but that's not my job. Is that I have to be a musician. So therefore, I am. But we all have binds. Some people are bound to their job. They don't know how to rest. I was talking to Sonny this morning. Sonny was telling me about his dad. His dad never knew about work. My dad was always working because he was a businessman. He had a plumbing business. There was always jobs or work to be done. But when one is slave to something or bound to something, there comes to a moment where you start to regret of that type of lifestyle. There's a point in your life when you say, how is this going to affect me? Is it going to be for good or for bad? Now, but let's not feel that we're that free. A lot of times we are slave to someone. Like me, I'm a little curious when I read that when one person killed another person to live, to move without, to move with this, with another person. I had a conversation with someone about the church. They said, I don't know how to live without my husband. And I said, what did you do before you met him? Is the reality is that we live in a world that tells us we need something or someone. Let's talk about that subject. In reality, we don't need anyone to live. We all have an instinct that gives us, that put in us of surviving. And my wife doesn't eat. I'm not going to go hungry because she's not eating. And vice versa. She's not going to die of hunger because I don't want to eat. I want to fast. Well, the reality is that because we are free, we can choose if we can live without someone or not. How many of us have something that binds us? Be honest, say yes, it's fine. We all have something that binds us, whether it be our children, our work, our cousins, parents, whatever. Something that's very difficult to let go is those loved ones. It hurts us. When they move to another place, they leave. Especially when they pass away. We don't know how to let go. Part of my retreat was that my brother died. I love my brother so much. And inside me, I didn't know how to let go. And I would ask myself, why him? At 67 years old, he still has a lot to live. But that's life. And maybe that was a bind that I had. That connection that I had with my brother. That link between us. Even now, we have to learn to let go. Because that's also a bind. And doesn't allow us to be freedom in Christ. That's why the Bible tells us, gives one of the commandments, and says, do not create an image. That's something that's on earth or in heaven. Because then you don't know how to live freely. But the freedom in which the psalmist speaks in the passage we read has nothing to do with the physical freedom. Am I clear? Because we all have a physical freedom. The psalmist was in prison at that moment. because he was saying, I can go wherever I want. I'm going to live with this freedom. He talks about walking in total confidence that nothing can happen without recognizing God's sovereignty. Am I clear? That we can go with this life with difficulties, with problems, and know that God is in his throne and he is the one that dictates yes or no to what happens here. And we should be, without worry. It will hurt us. The situation is going to hurt. Who's not going to feel pain in a situation like that? Every difficult situation that we go through, it tears us up inside. But know that you're in complete peace because God is in his throne. This is nothing. The Apostle Peter writes and says, it says, after you had suffered a little, he brings us in perfection. He affirms us and reestablishes. It's just after you've gone through a little bit, even though it may feel like eternity, it's something that's temporary. Will, I spoke to you about Amelia yesterday. Amelia's big. I met Amelia when she was 3 years old. Amelia's 6, and I can't believe it. 3 years have gone by so fast. Willie's probably feeling more because she's the mother. I will Medi. But our lives is temporary. We're here today. Tomorrow, who knows? We don't know. But to walk in complete freedom with God gives us that comfort that God is in his throne, that no matter what happens in this life, is nothing in comparison with who God is. Charles Spurgeon wrote, Saints find no bondage in sanctity. The spirit of holiness is a free spirit. He sets men at liberty and enables them to resist every effort to bring them under subjection. The way of holiness is not a track for slaves, but the king's highway for free men. That was written by Charles Spurgeon. This track or this road that we are living, the psalmist says, I'm free because I'm following your commandments. And Charles Spurgeon says this is the track of the King's Highway for men who want to be free. This is the road. As I was telling you before, we all have freedoms. In this world, physical, secular, we have freedom. You can get in your car and drive everywhere. But if you exceed the limit, speed limit, they'll pull you over. The guy wearing the red and blue and red hat will pull you over. And sometimes by doing nothing. You're going to tell me if I lie or not. When you see a cop, don't you get nervous? Why do we get nervous? It's an instinct of fear. Why? What do you say? Because then what we think immediately, am I doing something wrong? I used to get like that. Now I don't. If they pull me over, it's probably because I messed up. Now I see them. I don't even say hi. Now I used to say hi even out of respect. Not anymore. But reality is that we get this fear because we want to know if we're doing something right or not. And sometimes that's how we live with God. We live probably because we don't see him. Well, maybe not. But when situations, the difficult times come, the first thing we ask is why. The question of why implies several things. Why is this happening to me? or this is happening because I did something wrong, or because a person did something wrong. A lot of questions come to mind. But when we're free and we have that freedom in God, we don't ask why. When there's a total, complete trust in God's sovereignty, we say, may your will be done. For my mom, the loss of my brother was difficult. And she talked to us all. Pray for your so your brother can get better. I told her, Mom, we should pray that God's will be done. If God wants to heal him, he will heal him. I didn't want to see him suffer either. And reality is that we need to understand that God's sovereignty let us walk in complete freedom, with all trusting that God is in his throne. And this makes me understand what the Apostle Paul tells us in the 2nd of Corinthians. For the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of God is, there is freedom. Therefore, all of us, looking at the glory of the Lord with a naked face as in a mirror, are transformed from glory to glory in the same likeness as by the Spirit of the Lord. If God lives in us, there's total freedom. If we truly have God as the center of our lives, there's total freedom. And let's see that it's not saying that if we stay, we're gonna be free. It says we are transformed. Why? Because God is freeing us. If we allow that God let his work be done, we're going to be completely free. Freedom doesn't come because I choose it. It comes because how I live my life. As the psalmist says, if I follow your commandments, I will be completely free. Why? Because I'm following God's commandments. Just like there's consequences here on earth, there's also consequences with God. Believe me. And I think that it is difficult for us to understand because there's always painted this, that with God, everything's like flowers. If we follow Jesus, everything is going to be out. God never promised. Jesus never promised that. Jesus said, in this world, you will have afflictions. But trust that I have defeated the world. Meaning, in other words, no matter what happens, he's going to be with us. Is that he promised to be with us throughout now every day till the end of till the end of the world. He never promised us an easy life. One of the first questions we ask is, if God is love, why is it always happening to me? It's the consequence of life. Every action has a consequence, whether it be for good or bad, but there's a consequence, and you will have to do. So, if God cannot oppose those rules that he himself established, that's why God said at the beginning, let there be light. And what happened? What happened? You haven't read that part? In Genesis chapter 1, God said, let there be light, and there was light. So, every action has a reaction. It has a consequence. That's why God has established that in us. That's why he said that everything that man does, he will take account for. Everything we do here on earth, good or bad, we're going to be before God's jury, and God's going to say, look, this is all you did on the earth. Just like there's consequences here, there's consequences in heaven. But the apostle just told us that where the Spirit of God is, there's freedom. Therefore, we shouldn't be living in fear. We should not be living our life with fears if we should do it or not do it. If we have a good conscience, a clean conscience, we're going to always do something good. And let's not confuse freedom in our heart with physical freedom. The Apostle Paul, who had just written, he said we're free when the Spirit of God is there. He was in prison for many years while writing to the churches. Paul, you're thinking, how can a man who followed Jesus was in prison? Well, he wasn't in prison because he was doing craziness like you and I. He was in prison because for preaching the gospel of Jesus. But he felt such freedom that he was writing the letters to the churches and showing the churches that being physically bound is nothing compared to the freedom that is felt inside when you follow Jesus. In one of his writings, he said, I, Paul, servant of the Lord, slaved. He was slaved in a jail physically, but his soul was free. And that's the freedom that the psalmist felt. It was that physical freedom only. I'm going to live freely because I'm obeying your commandments. When we come to the Lord to follow his commandments, we're going to feel total freedom. And that's how it is. How many of you this morning feel something doesn't allow you to be free completely? There's a lot of things in my heart that don't let me be free 100%. But you know who can give us that freedom that we can't? Only Jesus. There's nothing that we can do on this earth in which the Lord will not free us from. There's a lot of things that we would like to do that we can't. But one of the things that I am sure of is that God allows us to be freedom. A few months ago, we were singing a song here. Of a writer who's already passed on to be with the Lord. And this song says, I'm no longer a slave to fear. I'm a child of God. To want to come closer to God gives us a freedom, not caring what we're going through here on earth. A lot of times, I believe that we confuse what truly makes us free. Just like happiness. Many think that you'll find happiness with friendship, their partner, having a child. I thought that I met couples that told me I thought that our happiness, the freedom was going to come with that. I mean, the happiness was going to come after we have a child. The happiness doesn't come. I think it comes from us within us. It comes from God. God has given us a lot of things and a lot of reasons. I should say a lot of things. God has given us a lot of freedoms for which we could be free through things which he has shown us that he is with us. God has deposited in us the Spirit, his Spirit. Look at how Jesus calls him at the end of his ministry. He said, look, I am leaving, but I will send who? The Holy Spirit. Yeah, he calls something else. The Counselor. When this Counselor came, it caused a revolution, not only in us, but in the whole world. And that Counselor that Jesus sent is here with us, even now. I think that the situation is that we tend to forget that the Spirit, that Counselor is here. The Father helps us to live in complete freedom. That even the things that we might bind us will turn into things that won't steal our complete freedom in Him. Amen.